Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome to the Cabaret. I am Becca Kasdan, and I will be your MC tonight. This evening, I am joined by Avshalom Weinstein, co-founder of the Violins of Hope exhibit. Avshi has flown in from Israel to share the violins that he and his father, Avshalom Weinstein, have lovingly restored from the Holocaust. I am honored to perform on these violins tonight and to have Avshi introduce the Violins of Hope later in this program. Avshi will be available for a meet and greet in the Spurlock lobby after this performance. I would also like to introduce Lori Fuller, our visual artist tonight. She has created a special painting on the podium here titled "We Stand Together," inspired by tonight's performance. I encourage you to have a closer look at this painting during intermission or after the concert. Additional information about her artwork can be found in your programs. In 2016, I attended the musical Cabaret at the Baltimore Hippodrome Theater. When many hear the word cabaret, the musical, based on Christopher Isherwood's novel, Goodbye to Berlin, is the first thing that comes to mind. Taking place in the 1930s Berlin at the Kit Kat Club, just as the Nazi Party was rising to power, the cabaret musical revolves around the master of ceremonies, a gay character who continuously interacts with the audience. At the conclusion of the musical, the MC violently rips off his costume, revealing a Jewish star. Immediately, bright flashes occur as he is executed, a symbolic metaphor for the Holocaust and the demise of the cabaret genre in 20th century Berlin. As I sat in the audience, many questions ran through my mind. I knew very little about the Berlin cabarets, and it was not a topic written about in any of my music history textbooks. I attended an art exhibit on Toulouse-Lautrec at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston and learned that in Montmartre, France, where European cabarets began, as many as 50,000 people attended cabaret performances across the city on a single Friday night. So how did the cabarets come into existence in Germany? And more importantly, why were they seen as a threat to the Nazi regime and consequently destroyed forever? But let's back up a little bit to an even bigger question. Raise your hands if you have ever heard the expression or seen the headline, "Classical music is dying." Not surprising. As a classically trained violinist, it is a statement I hear constantly throughout my career. During this past year, the New York Times conducted a study on classical music concert attendance and found the following. Of 143 performing arts organizations in North America, the number of tickets sold was down by 40% in the 2021-2022 season, compared with before the pandemic, and ticket revenues were down by 31%. The firm attributed the decline to a variety of factors, including ongoing unease about the coronavirus and changing habits around attending live performances. Another factor noted in the study, aging audiences for classical music. So now I was faced with another question. How can I, as a violinist, reimagine or redefine classical music performance to make them more accessible to younger, diverse audiences? As I learned more about the ingenuity, creativity, and interdisciplinary collaboration found at the Berlin cabarets, it quickly became apparent that even though this art form was ultimately destroyed by the Nazis, its legacy can live on as a means of inspiration for classical music performances in the 21st century. During this presentation, I will tell the story of the Berlin cabarets during the Weimar Republic, their destruction by the Nazis at the onset of World War II, their resurgence in Nazi ghetto holding areas, specifically Theresienstadt, and how we can be inspired by the artistry and format of this genre to reimagine 21st century classical music performances. I strongly believe that the answer to drawing in new generations of audiences and creating a more diverse and inclusive space lies within the framework of the Berlin cabarets and their unique ability to confront socioeconomic, political, and cultural issues in a non-confrontational manner that celebrates ingenuity and acceptance in the arts. Together with dancers, puppeteers, musicians, and visual artists, I will be performing music written during the Berlin Cabarets of the Weimar Republic, a special commission of 2 cabaret songs composed in Theresienstadt, and a world premiere of composer John Carmichael's suite, Puppet Show, exclusively arranged for this recital and inspired by the Berlin Cabaret musical style. Our story begins with World War I, the bloodiest, most gruesome human conflict in history, leading to a staggering 38 million casualties, 17 million deaths, and 20 million wounded civilians. After 4 years of unprecedented battle in which new technologies such as the grenade, poisonous gas, flamethrowers, and tanks were used in unbelievable force, Germany finally signed an armistice on November 11, 1918, effectively ending the war, leading to the formation of a republic by Germany's Social Democrats. However, the world was still deeply shattered by the last 4 years, and the Allied powers took their own measures to ensure that World War I would be the war to end all wars, ironically igniting the flame for World War II. In 1919, the Treaty of Versailles was negotiated between the Allies and Germany, now in a period we know as the Weimar Republic. The treaty clearly outlined that Germany was to accept full responsibility for the war by paying a large financial sum and giving up land to the Allies. By being excessively harsh on Germany, the Allies hoped that the Treaty of Versailles would discourage Germany from starting another war. In response, Germany started printing more money, causing hyperinflation and the downfall of the economy. Due to the revolutionary uproar as a result of the newly formed Social Democrat Republic, a struggling economy, and a war that had left citizens fractured and dejected, cabarets quickly found their way into the heart of Germany and had the perfect environment for unparalleled success. By 1922, there were 38 cabarets in Berlin alone. Alex Ross, music critic for the New York Times, writes that Berlin was a city of possibilities, of myriad outcomes, glowing with promise as well as threat. It played host to communists, Nazis, social democrats, nationalists, new objectivists, expressionists, Dadaists, and struggling romantics. In the wake of humiliation and defeat, Berlin shook off its imperial past and reinvented itself. The first all-night city, the city without shame. Perhaps one of the most defining features of the Weimar Republic was hyperinflation. At the peak of hyperinflation in November of 1923, a loaf of bread cost 200 billion marks. To put that in perspective, 1 trillion marks was equal to $1 US. Hyperinflation greatly impacted the economy, but even more significantly, the arts and culture scene of Berlin, as societal classes shifted, unions formed, and a wave of industrialism seized the nation. The creation of unions for middle-class workers created more protection against the economy than offered to the members of the cultured elite. Thus, a new societal class, or nouveau riche, was formed, diversifying the concert hall and creating a new concert dynamic. Since the arts and classical music in particular were commonly associated with the bourgeois, the nouveau riche desired to attend as many cultural events as possible to display their new wealth and to be seen among the elite of society. The new patron attended the classical concert not to actually hear Beethoven, but to be seen as hearing him. With a new thirst for cultural activities among Berliners as both audience members and performers, musical innovation soared. The first issues of music periodicals dedicated to music education, folk music, and amateur music making were published during the years of hyperinflation. Universal Edition, one of the most famous music publishers, went to great lengths to secure new music a proper hearing, dedicated to championing modernist music, and staffed with a number of leading Jewish thinkers, foreshadowing the association between Jewishness and musical modernism. However, despite all the musical ingenuity occurring at the time, there was one place where this did not seem to be happening: inside the classical music concert hall. In your programs, you will find a chart that displays all the composers whose pieces were performed at the Berlin Philharmonic and the Mannheim Philharmonic in Germany from 1922 to 1925. If you are thinking that this chart closely resembles the programming of classical orchestras in the 21st century United States, I would not be one to disagree. Kurt Weill, one of the most prolific composers of the Weimar Republic and closely linked with the Berlin cabarets, lamented about the inaccessibility and elitism associated with classical music in Germany. This past summer, I had the opportunity to conduct research at the Kurt Weill Foundation in New York City. I found the following newspaper clipping where Weill describes how he would address an audience of 12-year-old school children who had just been listening to classical music. I have just played for you music by Wagner and his followers. You have seen that this music consists of so many notes that I was unable to play them all. You would have liked now and then to join in singing the tune, but this proved impossible. You also noticed that the music made you feel sleepy and drunk, as alcohol or an intoxicating drug might have done. You don't wish to go to sleep. You wish to hear music that can be understood without explanation. You probably wonder why your parents attend concerts. It is with them a mere matter of habit. Nowadays, there are matters of greater interest to all, and if music cannot serve the interest of all, its existence is no longer justified. While Germany's middle class was quickly drawn to the orchestral concert hall as a means of establishing themselves among the culturally elite, the trend quickly faded, and more concertgoers sought other musical entertainment venues that offered more diversity, spontaneity, creativity, and excitement. The cabaret was suddenly raised to the status of opera. The Weimar Republic embraced a more relaxed form of government, quickly ended much censorship, and enacted more liberal social policies. These policies attracted artists, musicians, actors, and minority groups, particularly Jews, women, and the gay and black communities. With a far more relaxed government and loosened censorship, cabaretists found immense freedom to express themselves and discuss German life post-World War I. Perhaps the most important legacy of the Berlin cabarets was not only welcoming performers, theater owners, and audience members from diverse backgrounds and social classes, but ultimately being a pivotal site of experimentation, taboo breaking, and moral and intellectual revolution. And now let us enter the Berlin cabaret. The term cabaret is derived from a divided serving plate of hors d'oeuvres, offering a little bit of something for everyone. A cabaret program typically consists of small numbers that include dances, poems, songs, comic monologues or impersonations, which I will not be doing tonight, sketches, and one-act variety skits, combining literature, architecture, fashion, music, dancing, puppetry, politics, the economy, and embracing social and cultural issues. The Berlin cabarets truly embodied interdisciplinary artistic collaboration while creating a forum to address current-day affairs. The Berlin cabaret was often hosted by a conferencier, or what we would refer to today as a master of ceremonies. The conferencier's role was twofold: to introduce each cabaret act and to engage the audience in a witty, thought-provoking manner about controversial and taboo topics. While sex, religion, and politics were the most common cabaret topics, cabaret acts addressed everyday cultural and economic issues, such as dance trends, apartment shortages, fashions, bankruptcy, and of course, drinking. The fast-paced nature of the cabarets and constant juxtaposition of various art forms created an atmosphere of spontaneity and improvisation that reflected Berlin's industrialism and modernist urbanization. Audience participation was a key factor to the success of the cabaret, for it encouraged public opinion and open political discussion in a guilt-free environment in which Germans felt they could freely criticize their society without the fear of being persecuted, censored, or ridiculed by their neighbors. In addition, audience participation allowed the lines of audience and performer to be blurred, as each were largely dependent upon the other. Perhaps audience participation also flourished due to the smaller, more intimate venues in which cabarets were hosted. During a typical cabaret performance, audience members would be seated around circular tables and served food and drink, which inevitably led to more candor and comfort between the audience and the performers. Ultimately, the artistic purpose of the cabaret was to practice social criticism from the left, enlighten its audience, and change society. Lottie Lenya, theater performer and longtime partner of Kurt Weill, recalled to the Saturday Review, "We all wanted to see what would be attacked. The Berlin Cabarets was a combination of a satirical political column and a social gossip diary, and we all went to see the new programs." Satire and wit were central to the success of the Berlin Cabarets. In particular, audiences and performers favored jokes that roasted certain ethnic groups, played on societal stereotypes, or offered witty socio-political commentary. Walter Benjamin, a famous Jewish philosopher during the Weimar Republic, wrote that there is no better starting point for thought than laughter. Freedom of speech, expression, and performance had been highly restricted before World War I. Thus, Berlin saw a much more opinionated population that explored artistic freedom. While the constant jokes pertaining to certain ethnic groups and German politics were main contributors to the success of the cabaret, they were also one of its central pitfalls. It was not long before all cabaret scripts had to be submitted to police to determine whether they could be performed publicly. While censorship largely focused in three main areas, politics, sex, and religion, the three main topics of cabaret ridicule, the Berlin police were surprisingly lenient up until World War II, for they viewed cabaret satire as a healthy way to diffuse discontent among citizens and prevent the formation of an unruly Germany. Cabaret composers and musicians sought to break the divide between classical music and modern society, adopting a new musical style that veered away from classical romanticism, mastery of musical technique, and lengthy compositions. Instead, cabaret songs and music embraced simplicity, a variety of musical styles, ambiguous harmonies and keys, relatable lyrics, confident delivery, and the ability to transcend boundaries to engage listeners in meaningful social interactions. And now I will launch into my cabaret performance. Threepenny Opera was written by Bertolt Brecht and composed by leading Jewish musician Kurt Weill. With its simplistic, memorable melodies and intense satirical commentary on Berlin society, Threepenny represents the success of the Berlin cabaret style in a traditional classical music setting. Ernst Alfricht, the conductor for the Threepenny premiere, described the opening night. The auditorium didn't just thaw. It suddenly reached a boiling point. Clapping, shouting, trampling with their feet, people demanded an encore. I had forbidden all encores as being too vulgar for a serious theater. But now, as they did not allow the actors to go on, and they helplessly looked at me in my box, I agreed to a da capo. From that moment, every sentence, every note of the music was a success. Many of you will probably recognize the tune Mac the Knife, one of the most popular songs and often performed at the Berlin cabarets. This piece will be accompanied by shadow puppetry, one of the most common types of puppetries found at the Berlin cabarets, representing fantasy and illusionism. This will be performed by Latrell Bright and Mike O'Brien. Following Threepenny Opera, I will be performing the inner movements of John Carmichael's puppet show. The cabarets were iconic for celebrating the collaboration between performer and composer. This arrangement is a world premiere and a piece I commissioned exclusively for this performance that honors the Berlin cabaret style while emphasizing modernity and artistic collaboration. You will notice in the recital program that I start and end with the overture and finale of this piece. I encourage you to think about the arc of this presentation and how Puppet Show represents the success of the Berlin cabarets, their destruction by the Nazis, and the legacy of the performers and artists whose voices speak tonight through the Violins of Hope. This piece is accompanied by original artwork by Walter Dowdy, which will be projected on the screen, and a marionette performance by puppeteer Mike O'Brien. We will be taking a brief pause to set the stage, but I encourage you to sit back, enjoy, and reflect on the societal and cultural parallels between Weimar Republic Berlin and the 21st century United States. Thank you all for being here tonight. I so appreciate it. The loosened censorship of the Weimar Republic paved the way for Berlin's minority groups women, gays, blacks, and Jews to have more rights and freedoms, particularly in the arts, and were pivotal to the success of the Berlin cabarets. New birth control medications and abortion procedures became more widely accessible to women, creating the new image of the new woman, an iconic representation of Weimar Germany's newfound feminism. 100 years later, the United States is still fighting for these rights. The new woman was employed, embodied modernism in her fashionable flapper outfits and short bobbed hairstyle, and expressed urbanization through her daring independence. However, while women gained more representation in the workforce, they still faced great salary discrepancies, workplace discrimination, and ultimately remained subordinate to their male counterparts. At the Berlin cabarets, women were gainfully employed and also highly respected, as they were essential to the evening's success. Jews were also very active in the formation and success of the Berlin cabarets. Aside from being composers, performers, and writers, Jews were major financial contributors to the Berlin cabarets and disproportionately filled the audiences. Many Jews were silently blocked from universities and specific professions, despite Germany's claim of civic equality. Thus, Jews flocked to the Berlin cabarets, where they found acceptance, artistic freedom, and societal refuge. Weimar Germany's liberal attitude allowed for scientific and political movements for gay emancipation to receive more visibility. More gay venues began to pop up in Berlin, and the relaxed censorship laws encouraged more individuals to come out, build a stronger sense of community, and create a more poignant fight for gay rights. Claire Waldorf, one of the most famous cabaret singers, composed and sang "There's Only One Berlin," a song that became an overnight success. Waldorf was extremely open about her sexuality and her relationship with her partner. She inspired many in the gay community to express themselves, but also illustrated that the cabaret was an art form about inclusion and a safe medium for expressing artistic freedom. Das Lila Lied, the unofficial anthem of the gay rights movement in 1920s Berlin, warned against the dangers of prohibiting same-sex relationships. Dedicated to Jewish sexologist Magnus Hirschfeld, founder of the Institute of Sexual Research in Berlin and an advocate for gay rights, Das Lila Lied asserts the pride of the outsiders who refuse to be converted or persecuted and predict the day when they win both equal rights and tolerance. It wasn't until Stonewall in the 1970s that a culture would be as open to the gay community as 1920s Berlin. In your programs, you will find the lyrics to Das Lila Lied. We will play through the first verse, and then on the second verse, I invite you all to sing in German or English, or hum along, as we celebrate the importance of acceptance, equality, and inclusion of people from all backgrounds. honored tonight to introduce Avshalom Weinstein, co-founder of the Violins of Hope exhibit. Avshi, I would like to thank you for being a part of my recital tonight and for sharing your incredible violins and stories with us. The Violins of Hope exhibit will be on display at the Spurlock Museum until June 1st, and information about upcoming Violins of Hope events can be found in your programs. It is my honor to welcome to the stage Avshalom Weinstein.
Thank you very much and good evening. I can tell you one thing, that if my assistant principal in the high school would know that I'm going to do something like that, she would probably not believe me, but that's her problem. I'll tell you one thing that you won't see in your program. When we did a project in Nashville in 2018, I think it was about 2 or 3 months before we started the project, the orchestra got an email. And the email came from a guy who played jazz music. He was actually living in Nashville, and he had a double bass with quite an amazing story. Because you have to remember one thing: people who were in the camps, people who were playing music during the war, many of them had to be on the death marches during the end of the war. The last thing you want to have with you is something more to carry. My father has cello cases from the war, from even before. It's solid wood, beautiful, amazing, but it weighs approximately like those people weigh. In Chicago area, let's say you have quite a harsh winter, the winter they have in Eastern Europe, and walking with something like that, it's not going to make you walk faster or stay alive. So many of them had to leave their instruments behind. They managed to take the violins because, as you can see, it's rather small. You can make it. And the story of the double bass is quite unique. Everybody knows Schindler, right? Schindler List, the whole story. 2 men, brothers, who were in the workforce of Schindler. One was a double bass player, the other one was a violinist. And of course, during Nazi Germany, many things were forbidden, including cabaret, I guess, but of course also jazz music, because jazz music was inferior. Like some of the paintings you've seen here before, many of those artists were not allowed to be shown in Germany. I think some of their paintings were actually destroyed. And of course, jazz music was not allowed to be heard. But what did the Nazi occupiers and the guards in all the camps, what was their favorite music at nights when they had their own parties? Jazz music. And the Rosner brothers, they had to play almost every single night for them. They survived, like all the other people who worked for Schindler. And many, many years later, one of the Nazi officers, probably he managed to find one of the Rosner brothers in New York and sent him the double bass. And I'm very, very happy that I don't have it in the collection. We have over 100 instruments today. Shipping them is not that easy. If I have to put a bass on top, I don't want to imagine how much it's going to cost. And when the double bass came to the orchestra, because we only had one, so when they played the concert, they were switching all the time, all the musicians from the bass section, because they all wanted to play it. Like I said, we have more than 100 instruments, many, many, many different stories. You'll hear a few of them in a few minutes. And unfortunately, we only have few, because if you think about it, almost every single camp had at least one orchestra, sometimes more. In Auschwitz, for example, there was a women orchestra. It was ran later on by a woman named Alma Rosé. She was the niece of Gustav Mahler. And Alma actually had the women orchestra before the war in Europe. They played light music, valses, and stuff like that. And She was caught by the Nazis when she went back to Europe in the 40s. And even though that she converted to be Christian many, many years before the war, she was sent to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Now, the Nazis knew who she was, who was her uncle, her father, who used to be the concertmeister of the Vienna Philharmonic and had a very successful quartet, the Rosé Quartet. And if you can call someone a celebrity in a concentration camp, she would be the one. The Nazis used to call her Mrs. Rosé, Frau Rosé. The only barracks which had its own latrine was the women orchestra barracks in Birkenau. Alma herself, unfortunately, did not survive. She died about 2 or 3 months before the liberation. But 22 out of 24 women from the orchestra survived. One of the last instruments, the last one actually, that my father finished, it's, we put the strings on it something like 180 hours ago, last Friday. It belonged to a woman named Violette Silberstein. She was a young girl. She lived in France. She learned a little bit of violin. And when she was sent to Auschwitz, to Birkenau, she tried to be accepted to the orchestra. Because the musician got a little bit of better conditions, better food, less work, it was considered to be a very desirable job, but not everybody can play. So she did an audition. She wasn't accepted. And later on, Alma Rosé became the head of the orchestra, and she accepted her. And one of the times the orchestra had to walk from point A to point B. Violette was too sick, she couldn't move almost. She was dragging behind. The Nazi officer, he comes with a gun, puts it to her head. Alma comes back running. She says, no, you cannot kill her. She's my best violinist. Of course, this was a lie, but she survived. The amount of stories that we have is impossible. We can stay here for days. But you will hear, like I said, few of the instruments, few of the stories. You can see a few up here in the exhibition. Many more of them around, I guess, Illinois, right, Elaine? I should say Illinois because there are too many places here that the instruments are going to, too many exhibitions. I can't say all of them because honestly I don't really know. But I really hope you enjoy and maybe see you in one of the other events that we are doing. It's been a wonderful concert until now, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Avshi, for sharing your incredible stories and the inspiration that these violins share with audiences globally. As previously foreshadowed, Nazi Germany was not supportive of the Berlin cabarets, primarily for all the reasons that made cabarets successful in the first place, including political content and the fact that many theater owners and cabaret performers were gays, Jews, or liberals who were perceived as a threat to the Nazi regime. Rising to power in January 1933, Hitler quickly deemed all Jewish musicians inept and banned Jews from public sectors. In a January 1933 cabaret performance, dancer Julia Marcus performed a dance that warned the audience of the current political situation and foreshadowed devastation, destruction, and war. A reviewer in the audience captured Marcus's performance by writing, "A few rhythms and rather uncharacteristic movements, then makeup, powder, and the mirror during the dance, and suddenly her purse turns into a gas mask, which covers her smooth waltz face while the dance continues as before." During this performance, Hitler was appointed chancellor, the Reichstag was set on fire, and the systematic persecution of political and racial enemies began. At first, the cabarets could not be shaken, as even Nazi officials enjoyed the burlesque entertainment, amusing comedy, and musical variety that classical orchestra concerts did not offer. In 1933, Hitler, walking into a mostly empty hall at the official Meistersinger by Wagner, sent out patrols to fetch high-ranking party members from Berlin's cabarets, forcibly shaking them awake as they dozed off during the Wagner performance. As Hitler and the Nazi Party rose to power during the Third Reich, many cabaret artists, especially those in the conferencier role, tried to use humor and satire to discuss social, political, economic, religious, and cultural issues in a non-confrontational manner through the arts. However, this proved largely unsuccessful. After all, a Nazi speaker once told a group of farmers, "We don't want higher bread prices. We don't want lower bread prices. We don't want unchanged bread prices. We want National Socialist bread prices." It would have been hard for any cabaretist to top that line. By the mid-1930s, Nazis forced many of the existing Berlin cabarets to perform positive cabarets as a means of propaganda that promoted Nazi exploits and mocked enemy actions. Wildly unsuccessful, Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's right-hand man and Reich Minister of Propaganda, banned all political cabarets from the German stage in 1937. However, the art of the cabaret had already begun its demise, for by eliminating open political discussion and censoring artistic expression, the essence of the cabaret no longer existed. In 1938, Hitler displayed his notorious degenerate music exhibition that deemed all music written and performed by Jews, gays, blacks, or any minority group as anti-nationalistic and prohibited from any performance. Any modern music that did not fit into the mold of Wagner, Beethoven, or Strauss was also effectively banned. Goebbels would issue his last decree in 1941 against the Berlin cabarets by forbidding the position of the conferencier, turning the beloved Berlin cabaret art form into a simple variety and vaudeville show that played to dwindled audiences. An official of the propaganda ministry describes the final remnants of the Berlin cabaret in November 1944. In Berlin, there are 2 nighttime cabarets for soldiers passing through, which only play at night and which may be visited only by soldiers in transit without any accompanying persons. This arrangement was made in order to provide a shelter for soldiers waiting for train connections, since Berlin's railway stations have been largely destroyed. Our story now brings us to Theresienstadt, a Czech fortress that became a ghetto exclusively for Jews, holding up to 53,000 inmates at a time. Theresienstadt served as a holding place for Jews before many were deported to concentration camps. It also served as a means of Nazi propaganda and was shown as a model ghetto that was displayed to Red Cross representatives in 1944 to deceive the true nature of the final solution, a systematic way of mass murder, largely through gas chambers, that ultimately murdered 6 million Jews. The Nazis' original intent was 11 million. However, once the Red Cross finished their inspection, horrid conditions of overwork, malnourishment, and disease resumed. 141,000 Jews were sent to Theresienstadt, with a total of 33,000 dying in Theresienstadt, and 88,000 Jews were deported to concentration camps, primarily Auschwitz. Historically, Theresienstadt has been noted for its extremely rich cultural life. Due to the Nazis' plan of presenting the Red Cross with a rosy picture of Jewish ghetto life, orchestra, chamber music, theater, opera, and even cabarets were a unique part of the Jewish Theresienstadt experience. Through musical performance, the Nazis' allowance and encouragement of musical creativity was multidimensional. Part of their purpose was to put on a facade for the Red Cross, but another dimension was sadism. The Nazis knew the scope of the final solution and that many of the Theresienstadt inmates would be deported to concentration camps. However, despite the clear intention of the Nazis encouraging cabaret performances for their own purposes, the cabaret also served as a form of resistance for Jews against their Nazi oppressors. The cabaret was a unique art form that lent itself well to ghetto performance. For starters, the genre was an eclectic mix of music, poetry, theater, art, and comedy that could be easily pieced together and required very little in terms of materials and instruments. Theresienstadt cabarets were performed in a variety of venues, including performance halls, attics, barracks, courtyards, and infirmary wards. Much of the music used in Theresienstadt cabaret performances was written prior to World War II, such as tunes from Kurt Weill's Threepenny Opera, and were combined with a number of new songs that addressed the living conditions and mindset of Theresienstadt inmates. The most popular Theresienstadt cabaret was Carousel, written by Kurt Gehren, a famous Jewish actor and film director. Performed over 50 times and featured in the Red Cross visit in 1944, Carousel addressed the importance of survival, adaptability, realism, humor, and solidarity among Theresienstadt inmates. The most popular song was set to lyrics by Leo Strauss and was titled As If, which we'll be playing tonight. Theresienstadt is described as an as-if city with as-if occupations, as-if celebrities, as-if food, and as-if beds, with the last stanza suggesting that the visions of a better future might also be as if. While As If may be viewed as a song displaying hopelessness, it is in fact a song that represents the necessity of adaptability and resistance, not only against the Nazis, but resistance against being powerless. Many inmates who arrived at Theresienstadt were told that it was a spa town or an elevated ghetto, yet were thrust into the harsh reality of unsanitary living quarters, little food, and forced labor. The massive deception that new arrivals at Theresienstadt faced often led to feelings of depression or rebellion, making them prime candidates for deportation. As survivor Jacob Jacobson stated, just because the danger of deportation was menacing everyone at every moment, the people in the ghetto had to live as if this danger did not really exist, as if a life of freedom and human dignity was waiting around the corner. Thus, cabarets and Carousel in particular used music to relate to prisoners and the newfound realities of their circumstances, while also sending the message that resilience and adaptability were necessary to show resistance against the Nazis. According to survivor Ivan Klima, it was precisely cabaret that enjoyed the greatest interest and response among the interned. Much like the cabarets prior to World War II, the cabaret performances in Theresienstadt sought to retain many of the characteristics that made the genre successful during the interwar years. Satire and wit remained key components of cabaret scripts, yet ultimately had to be even more nuanced than before to avoid being censored or canceled altogether. While only a few cabaret scripts survived destruction, they all share common themes of nostalgia, resistance, entertainment, and resilience. It is remarkable that during a time of so much oppression and hopelessness, that Jewish prisoners were able to successfully stage, compose, and craft innovative cabaret performances that reflected their current circumstances and provide a necessary outlet for diversion. Ultimately, while the cabaret genre was stretched to its limit due to extreme censorship, the cabaret did not perish because it could not cope with inhuman conditions. Cabaret died because the Nazis murdered so many of the human beings who sustained it: women and men, writers and composers, actors and musicians, professionals and amateurs, entertainers and audience. And now for the stories of the violins we will be playing tonight. This first violin belonged to Zvi Hoftel, the first concertmaster of the Palestine Orchestra, later to become the Israel Philharmonic Orchestra. It is a French instrument made by famous violin maker Auguste Dart in the town of Mirecourt around 1870. Zvi Hoftel was one of about 100 musicians gathered by Bronislaw Huberman all over Europe and brought to Palestine. Before the war, Hoftel was a distinguished violinist, but he joined Huberman after losing his job in a German orchestra for being Jewish. Huberman's vision to create an all-Jewish orchestra in Palestine saved an estimated 1,000 lives of musicians and their families between 1935 to 1939. She was born in 1925 as Valeria Teichner in Hungary, But in 1944 Auschwitz, she was named A12763. Valeria started violin lessons at the age of 6 and stopped playing only when life became unbearable. On the cattle train to Auschwitz in 1944, she forgot her violin. Getting off the train, she went through a selection where she lost her mother. Sent to the music barrack, Valeria cried, unable to play the violin handed to her. She was then sent to the laundry barrack, only to go through another selection and ended up in Gorlitz, another hard labor camp, to work in a munition factory. The sadistic capo in the labor camp used to play his violin every evening. Valeria recalled that he played very well. On Christmas Eve, all the prisoner musicians were ordered to play and sing for the commanders. Valeria sang Lorelei, accompanying herself on the violin. The next day, the officer's cook threw a piece of cake for her over the fence. However, when she was caught eating the cake, the capo sentenced her to be hanged. When the car came for her, the capo called out, "Violinist out!" but then changed his mind, hit her hard on her face, and let her stay. She was liberated by the Soviets on May 8, 1945. Valeria's future husband, Sandor Fischer, was born in 1919 in Romania. He also started violin lessons at the age of 6, and at the age of 18, changed his name to Farago Sandor to avoid persecution for being Jewish. When the situation worsened and his father was conscripted to hard labor, Sandor replaced him, and this violin went along with him to the work camp. Soon, Sandor was ordered to play this violin to entertain the officers during dinner, and afterwards he was able to smuggle some leftover food for his friends. In 1944, he managed to escape the labor camp and join the Soviets. Sandor stayed in Hungary for many years until emigrating to Israel, marrying Valeria, and raising a family of 3 daughters, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. All along, his daughter said that he never parted with this violin. He played to the end of his days. This next violin belonged to the Katzenstein family of Hamburg, Germany. The violin was played by Daniel Storck's grandmother, Elsa, an accomplished violinist. Her talents for playing the violin were recognized when she was only 10 years old, and she became a member of the Gedoch, a fine association of female musicians. She studied at the Hochschule für Musik Berlin for 1 year and was a member of the Reichsmusikkammer, an elite association of musicians. Only members of this association were permitted to teach private violin lessons. Elsa was banned from the association in 1935 because of the Nuremberg Laws, a set of anti-Semitic and racist laws enacted by Nazi Germany. On April 4th, 1939, the conductor of the Kammer Orchestra Hamburg wrote a letter praising Elsa's talent as a musician and expressed his sorrow that she was moving to the United States. The Katzenstein family had to sell most of their valuables. However, this violin made the escape with them to America. This violin is a small 7/8 violin, which is perfect for me, which used to be called a woman's violin. This violin is on loan to the Violins of Hope collection by the Storck family. The violins that we played tonight all share a common denominator. They are symbols of hope and a way to say, remember me, remember us. Life is good. Celebrate it for those who perished, for those who survived, for all people. We will now perform 2 cabaret songs, As If Town and Theresienstadt is the Best Place on Earth. Both of these songs were composed in Theresienstadt. These songs were originally discovered in a recording handed down by a Danish Theresienstadt survivor to Polish singer Bente Kahan in 1992. I would like to thank Ronan Nissan, who created a beautiful new arrangement of these songs exclusively for this performance, and Dahlia Luxemburg, who translated the songs into English.
life has two sides, that's well known. The one sunny, the other dark. You can't bemoan. If from a bright side the world is viewed, then even yesterday's cabbage will smell new. Let's pretend, for the sake of sanity, that the sunny side is the only reality. If you find the motto to have merit and worth, then to raise and shine is the best place on earth. If you're annoyed that mail delivery has collapsed, if you're upset that salads a thing of the past, if you miss the sight of violets and daisies growing in the clump, then you quickly deduce that Theresienstadt is a dump. All the more reason to imagine sense of working in a ghetto, that guarding the outhouse is a stroll al fresco. Imagine a tin bowl holding a wiener schnitzel to add to your girth. Then Theresienstadt is the best place on earth. No, my child, Theresienstadt was not the best place on earth.
The United States faces numerous societal issues, including the coronavirus pandemic, political instability and division, a shaky economy with unprecedented inflation, health insurance access and affordability, and the civil rights of women, gays, and blacks, to name a few. Weimar Germany shared all of these societal problems, and the comparisons between the two is eerily similar. Both Weimar Germany and the United States saw declining audience attendance at classical music concerts, as well as older audience demographics among their patrons. During the Weimar Republic, orchestral programming was a main contributing factor for diminishing audience attendance, as the lack of diversity, repetition of works by a small group of composers, and rigid concert hall etiquette all led audience members to seek entertainment elsewhere, primarily at the cabarets. The musicians, dancers, and artists at the Berlin cabarets often performed or displayed original works for the audience, an element that has proven highly successful when incorporated into 21st century classical music concerts. Today, programming, venues, seating, audience participation, interdisciplinary collaboration, and discussion are now as equally important as the music itself. With the rise of affordable and portable technology, music is readily accessible via radio, streaming platforms, and on-demand music apps. Weimar Germany was to the radio as the United States is to Spotify. And yet, despite the increased accessibility of classical music via at-home streaming devices, there is still a desire among people to attend live performances that offer new and exciting social and musical experiences. The rise of technology combined with a global pandemic and unprecedented inflation have resulted in more artistic and cultural institutions needing to reinvent themselves to attract the public. Today, audience members attend classical concerts in the hopes of achieving an enjoyable social and musical experience that brings together interdisciplinary collaboration, diverse programming, improvisation, performer-audience interaction, and the opportunity to disconnect from a fast-paced technological society. Classical music institutions and performing artists need to meet the cultural revolution that is taking place in the 21st century. For too long, classical music institutions and artists have created a stiff divide between performer and audience. But it is when performers and audience members collaborate and converse with one another that classical music begins to soar and a stronger sense of community is built. With great political, economic, and cultural divides, the United States is in the perfect position to redefine the role of classical music in society and draw upon the successful elements of the Berlin cabarets to reimagine new possibilities and entice new generations of audiences to attend classical concerts. In your programs, you will find a survey about your experience at tonight's concert. I encourage you to fill out these surveys by scanning the QR code online, or you can fill them out in person after the concert and leave them in this box on the stage. These surveys will contribute to my dissertation research on the success of incorporating Berlin cabaret elements into 21st century classical performances. After the concert, I invite you to join me and Avshi in the Spurlock lobby for a meet and greet and dessert reception. I'm so grateful for everyone who has made tonight possible. I would like to thank Avshalom Weinstein for joining me in tonight's performance and for loaning his beautiful violins. It has been an honor and a privilege to perform on these extraordinary violins tonight. I would like to thank Hillary Wenk, Eileen Ullman, who is here tonight, and the entire team at JCC Chicago for sharing the Violins of Hope collection with the Spurlock Museum and for making this event and upcoming Violins of Hope events possible. I would like to extend a huge thank you to the Champaign-Urbana Jewish Federation for sponsoring this event and for making my vision possible. Yael Gertner, Mayan Weinberg, Brian Kahn, Jennifer Lask, and the entire CUJF board, thank you so much for your support. I would also like to thank Brian, Julie, and the entire Spurlock Museum team for their generosity in hosting my doctoral recital and their support in making sure everything went smoothly tonight. A big thank you to all my sponsors and donors for their support and generosity in making this program possible. I would like to thank my amazing advisor and violin professor, Meg Freivogel, for her guidance and preparation of this recital. It's also her birthday today, so happy birthday, Meg. I would also like to thank my doctoral committee members, Dr. Stephen Fairbanks, who is here tonight, Dr. Michael Silvers, and Dr. Christina Bashford. Tonight's performance would not have been possible without all my talented artistic collaborators. Thank you all for your time, expertise, and creative contributions. It has been a joy to collaborate with all of you. Lastly, I would like to thank my parents and my sister Anna for their amazing support throughout my entire musical career and education, and for being there for me every step of the way. Thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight. I so appreciate your support. We're going to do one quick final setup of the stage for the finale, and then I hope you will join us at the dessert reception. Thank you.